Joining me right now in studio is Middle East analyst Micah Halpern. Welcome, Micah.
A pleasure, Roxanne.
Well, we want to talk to you about what this report means, and certainly the Saudis changed their stories multiple times. They initially said he left that building, the consulate in Turkey, alive.
Certainly. One of the important parts about the investigation, or more importantly, the report, is that it's sort of placing the responsibility internationally, saying we as an international community are suggesting that the Saudis are responsible. And now there has to be more investigation. Plausible deniability exists for the Crown Prince. There's no question about it. Plausible deniability means that there's really no connection between a command, an order to execute or assassinate Khashoggi, but rather there's a line that might be connected. So it's logical, but it's not necessarily evidence, certainly not evidence on an international level.
Well, the Saudis did put 11 suspects on trial that they linked to that killing, but there's some concern about that. First of all, they think that this trial is really insufficient and it just should be completely abolished. But what really is the reason that many people should be concerned about the Saudis putting these 11 suspects?
Well, the Saudis themselves almost immediately said, when the dust settled, we'll say, almost immediately said, let's find out who might have been responsible on a local level. And so they picked these people and they began to try them and convicted them. Now, the interesting thing about that and how it fits into a larger concept of justice is Saudi justice is not what you and I in the West would consider justice. Right. And that's important to recognize also. However, there are larger issues at stake here. You see, the international community is saying we must step up our game against the Saudis with regard to justice. And that's what's really being played here. I must say, though, it is not evidence. What we saw today in the report is not evidence that the Crown Prince is actually responsible, because it doesn't make the link at all. However, it suggests that you have to have more investigations. I don't know that anything will actually arise.
You are correct about that. And it also doesn't implicate anybody in the royal family
Correct.
at all. So what does this mean for the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia? Certainly, I believe the report did call for more sanctions, did it not?
Yeah. So the issue between the relationship between the Saudis and the United States is not one of friendship. It's one of necessity and one of mutual desire and goals. And right now their goal is to unite against Iran. So what happens is, that being said, there are certain things that the United States, even with people that they work with, must step up their game with regard to human rights. This is a human rights issue, not just with regard to this particular execution and assassination, but also with regard to issues of women, minorities, all kinds of questions in Saudi Arabia.
Exactly.
Saudi Arabia is not a friend of the United States. What Saudi Arabia is an important partner in handling certain issues. And we have to make that distinction. Because there are relationships does not necessarily mean we're friends.
Good point. Micah, I want to ask you this with regards to the recordings that were revealed. I'm going to read a quote here. One of the Saudi individuals in that room upon Khashoggi's entry said, "Did the sacrificial animal arrive?" They discussed cutting up a human and how it would work with a bone saw. This is just staggering. It's sickening to the stomach.
Yeah, it goes beyond. And these kinds of details are sort of freak the average reader out. This is the kind of stuff you would want to read in some sort of novel or a crime novel or something like that. You don't expect it to be
playing out
in a report of the United Nations talking about an assassination. So it really went beyond the pale.
Okay, so we do know that Khashoggi was a fierce critic of the prince. And so for that reason alone, I mean, you know, it doesn't really seem like there can be all of everything revealed in this.
Yeah, no, it's important to recognize that because when you're the head of a state, and the Crown Prince is really the effective head of the state, it doesn't necessarily mean he's giving the order to happen. He might be very happy with the execution or assassination of Khashoggi, but that doesn't necessarily mean he said, go do it. If you get my point. And it's go do it, which is what you need in order to convict or create other issues. So, that I don't think will exist. Just like here, the President of the United States is not necessarily aware of what's going on in the CIA on a daily basis.
Okay, Micah, so give it to us. What are the Saudis saying? I mean, certainly you hear these recordings and it's, you know, everybody deserves the right to a fair and just trial, but it's a little difficult knowing what we know now.
Right, exactly. So what we have is an interesting thing. The Saudis themselves, if I were advising the Saudis from the outside, I would say don't say anything. Let this blow over.
Right.
In other words, do not respond. And it's important to recognize that. That said, however, it's really important to recognize that the Saudis themselves have a reputation of this. Not necessarily executions to this level, but of massive human rights violations. And that's important. They don't take critique well. Khashoggi himself was critical of a lot of different things, including Israel, extremely critical. That doesn't mean you go and kill him. On the one hand. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily mean the king said go kill him, but many of his people may have understood that that was the policy and the principle.
So you are just saying let the investigation
continue.
Exactly. Let it reveal what it needs to reveal.
And hopefully we will see some end. I don't think we will, though. I think that it will be a dead end.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for your insight.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Middle East analyst Micah Halpern.